question for you, Scott.
Yeah.
Oh, Stuart's here.
Let them all in.
Light this thing up.
All right. Sounds good. Here they come.
Excellent. Welcome to this regular meeting of the Birmingham Planning Board. Wednesday, June 23rd, 2021. If we could please call the roll, and remember, my friends, if you could please just let us know your current location when you respond, whether you're here.
Thanks so much, Scott Klein.
I am present in the city of Birmingham.
Robin Boyle.
Here, City of Birmingham.
Stuart Jeffries.
Here, City of Birmingham.
Bert Kozak.
Here, City of Birmingham.
Daniel Scher.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Brian Williams.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Janelle Wible-Boyce.
Here, Birmingham, Michigan.
Jason Emron.
Recording in progress.
Jason Emron. Missy Merman.
Here in Birmingham, Michigan.
Daniel Murphy.
Here, Birmingham.
Jane Weinman. Okay.
All right, we are quoted. Thank you very much. Let's move to review and approval of the minutes from our regular meeting on June 9th. Are there any comments or corrections to be had? I am seeing no hands go up. Well done to you. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from June 9th?
So moved.
Support.
I believe that was Mr. Boyle. Is that correct with the motion? And Mr. Scher with the support?
Yes.
Excellent. Are there any conversation at the board level? Hearing none, could we please call the roll?
Robin Boyle.
Yes.
Daniel Scher.
Yes.
Brian Williams.
Yes.
Janelle Wible-Boyce.
Yes.
Scott Klein.
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Bert Kozak.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion approved. Let's move through chairperson's comments. Well, good evening. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight, though, in a disappointing turn of events. We're not going to consider many of them due to some technical reasons and some other reasons that Jana will get into. For the public that has joined us, there will be an opportunity at certain points tonight to provide public input. To do so, I will announce that it's time for public input and use the raise hand function at the bottom center console of Zoom. I have a list of all of those who are in attendance. I will do my best to call them off in the order I see them. And when I do so, please just introduce yourself and your place of, or where you are right now, your location, and then provide your brief comments at the appropriate time. Thank you very much. And with that, let's get into it. Jana, is there any change to the published agenda?
There is not a change. No, there's not a change to the published
To the public agenda. Okay. Boy, if you might indulge me quickly on this matter, in light of the two significant postponements that are going to occur tonight, I think that we might need to take advantage, and I'm hoping you'll indulge me in perhaps amending the agenda tonight to add a study session item at the end. That study session item would be a high-level debrief of our conversation with the City Commission Monday night. By no means do I mean to get into those topics tonight, but I think it's, in my mind, given the schedule that we likely face and the tasks that are in front of us, it's, in my mind, a good idea to organize our thoughts, at least as far as approach, perhaps even list out if there are items that we want staff in particular to collect for us as we start this process later on, and maybe even just get on the same page as far as our timeline and priorities for these. Is there anyone on the board that cares to counter that or have any concerns? Or would the board be open to a motion to amend the agenda as such to add a study session item right prior to the miscellaneous business and communication?
Or we could add it under other business, couldn't we?
Wherever you like.
I think logically it would make more sense, and I'll move that we discuss the results of and process to be followed as a result of Monday's meeting under item G4, other business.
Okay. A motion by Mr. Williams. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Ms. Boyce. Thank you. Any conversation at the board level? Could we please call the roll?
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce,
Yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries,
Yes.
Bert Kozak,
Yes.
Daniel Scher.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Let's move ahead. We have the first item for business is the special land use permit review and accompanying final site plan and design review for 300 and 394 South Old Woodward and portions of 294 East Brown. Mr. Williams and board, as a reminder, I am recusing myself from these matters, even though we are just going to be talking about a rescheduling. I will recuse myself just to keep the record clear based on a potential conflict due to a business association that I have through my company. So with that, Mr. Williams, if you would take the gavel, and Jana, if you could throw me into the recusal penalty box or whatever you do.
I will do that.
And I assume Nasim now votes.
Nasim can vote yes if she wishes.
Okay. Well, I think at the last meeting in June, we discussed what would happen if the city commission did not take action with respect to the application for rezoning and amendment to the zoning map. And that's what happened. Am I correct, Jana? They did not take action.
They did not take action because there was a noticing error. The signage was not posted properly in accordance with the zoning ordinance and the guidelines of the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. When we went out to verify the complaint that was received, that it wasn't meeting those standards, we also found that they didn't have what they needed for this meeting either, and it was also within the 15 days for this meeting. So A, the city commission didn't take any action on the rezone or the economic development map changes, and B, they had improper notice on site for this meeting. So we would ask that it be rescheduled to July 14th. We would need a motion to amend the rules of procedure to add a site plan to the study session meeting on July 14th to do that, number one. And number two, I just wanted to point out that if it is moved to that meeting or any other meeting for that matter, I intend to renotice everything just to be on the cautious side. New notice.
When is the commission expected to look at the issue of rezoning and the zoning map?
July 12th.
July 12th. So that would, again, be before the suggested meeting for us. Okay, any discussion at
Let me just double check. Yes, July 12th.
any discussion by the board?
So you're correct. It would be.
Janelle?
I just want to let everyone know I will not be at the July 14th meeting.
Okay,
Joining the parade, I'm likely not to be there as well.
well,
Might I s-
whatever the respective schedules for July 28th. I mean, we have two alternates, but we're going to be short.
We do.
Because the chair will not be present either. So the max we will have is what, 6?
Correct. Might I suggest we could still set it to July 14th, and if there's anybody else that's missing, we can always postpone it at that time to the 28th, because we do have a full slate for July 28th as well.
All right. Anybody else going to miss the 14th? All right. Any other discussion at the board level to the public on this issue? I don't see any hands raised, so the chair will entertain a motion first to amend the rules of procedure to permit us to permit a special land use permit review and final site plan and design review for Wednesday, July 14th. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second for that motion?
Sure.
The motion.
Okay, Bert. Bert seconds Robin's motion. Any discussion? Okay, to the public, I see Mr. Bloom has his hand raised. Please recognize Mr. Bloom.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. I hope this is the right topic. You had mentioned, or Jana had mentioned that there was a wrong notice on the property over at Brown to be rezoned. It is my understanding that there was a resident in Birmingham who was taking regular photographs of that area, and that at no time when this person was taking photographs that there was any sign there. And then when the city found out about it, a sign magically appeared, and then it turned out to be the wrong sign. If that were to be the case, then the representative of that property would have been misleading or lying to the city about the notice that was placed on the property. And I'd just like to ask the planning board if that's something they would like to investigate to make sure that there is honest representation to the city about what actually transpired. Thank you.
Well, I'll give my response. I don't think it's the planning board's responsibility. I think you can raise the issue with the city commission at their meeting next Monday. See what they want to do. We don't have the facilities, nor do we have the ability to direct the staff to do anything on that regard or incur the expense. Any other response from the board? I think it's appropriate to raise that topic, Mr. Bloom, with the city commission or with the city manager himself. Any other comments from the public? Okay, let's call the roll with respect to amending the rules of procedure with respect to the special land use permit and final site plan and design review scheduled now to be scheduled for July 14th.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Bert Kosek,
Yes.
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce,
Yes.
Naseem Ramin,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Okay, let's do a second motion now to actually schedule the special land use permit review for 300 and 394 South Old Woodward and portions of 294 East Brown, new construction, and also final site plan and design review for that site for Wednesday, July 14, 2021. Is there a motion?
So moved again.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Kosek, moved by Mr. Boyle. Any discussion at the board? To the public? I see no hands raised. Please call the roll.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Bert Kosek,
Yes.
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce,
Yes.
Naseem Ramin,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Okay, I think we can call the chairman back in. Thank you.
You're welcome. Just give him a minute to come back.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I assume we're all set?
Yes.
Ready to return? Excellent. Thank you. Let us move along to item F, the final site plan and design review for 35001 Woodward Avenue, a parking lot, several parking lots, and the current Hunter House restaurant.
Yes, this is an application for final site plan and design review. As you know, I think you're all fairly familiar with this discussion. I'll go through briefly a little bit of the history just for the viewing public, but I know you're all quite familiar with it. Basically, as the chairman said, the Hunter House restaurant is sitting on this property encompasses the entire block minus the northwest corner, which is city-owned public property, which is a surface parking lot. So where it also includes the Hunter House, the property on which the Hunter House sits, and the property on which the gravel temporary surface parking lot sits that the owner of the property has leased to the city over the past, well, I'm not sure how many, maybe 2 years or so. So total, the land area in question is a half an acre. As you know, they previously submitted a community impact study and a preliminary site plan review for that site. There have been several iterations. The first one was a 5-story building that had a hotel in it. That went through and got approval from the planning board for preliminary and for the CIS. And then the applicant changed the plans to still be a 5-story mixed-use building, but went from hotel to a mix of office and residential on site. So they came back and brought that back to the planning board in January 22nd of 2020, the first time. At that time, when they switched from a hotel to office and residential, they also had a surface parking lot on the northern portion of the site underneath the building. As many of you know, the board was concerned about that. You ended up postponing it, asking them to remove that surface parking lot due to safety concerns. They came back on April 22nd of 2020. And at that time, the board unanimously approved the revised preliminary site plan because they had removed that surface parking lot and put back in the retail space on the first floor. So then the first floor was retail, the entrance to the underground parking, which was 2 levels of underground, floor of office, and then residential above. There was an issue since that was our first Zoom meeting, if I remember correctly, on April 22nd, and the wrong site plan was shown on the Zoom screen. So we ended up bringing it back out of an abundance of caution on May 13th of 2020, just to make sure that that everyone understood what site plan was being approved. We renoticed it at that time, and the board did also unanimously approve that night the preliminary site plan, again, adding the 9th condition that said which set of plans, which sheet applied to the approval. And that was the sheet dated April 3rd of 2020. So then at that time, several months later, I believe it was September of 2020, the applicant revised the site plan again, based on some comments and concerns and requests of the owner of the Hunter House property, or sorry, the Hunter House building and business. And they put back the surface parking lot on the first floor to see, and made a few other tweaks to see if that was something that the planning board would approve. As you probably remember, it was a 6-1 vote to deny that with the surface parking lot. The board asked them to go back to the first floor design that included all the retail spaces and one of the potential retail spaces maybe being the Hunter House itself. And that's what they then went back to. They removed the surface parking lot, and now here they are tonight for their final site plan and design review. So they've removed that surface parking lot, added back in the retail, and then the other significant change that's made from the last time, previously the entire second floor was office use. Now they've changed it, so the second floor they've split roughly in half. Half of it will be office space, and the other half they've added more residential units. So that's what they're proposing. And if you give me a minute, I will put the site plan up. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So here you get a better idea of the site in case you have forgotten. It's essentially mostly the entire block surrounded by Woodward, Maple, Park Street, and Hamilton. The portion of city land is this corner of the site here. So what they're proposing to do, well, actually in a sliver of land here, is have a 5-story mixed-use building taking up the entire block, encompassing potentially the Hunter House in that retail space on the corner where they are now. Now, I know previously the planning board had asked them not to mark specifically who the retailers, restaurants, et cetera, were going to be. So they have marked them, as you asked, as general retail spaces. So they've got 3 retail spaces on the first floor. They have an office lobby and a residential lobby, and then the entrance from Park Street for the underground parking area. As I mentioned, they have 2 levels of underground parking. They're providing 82 parking spaces as a total on those 2 underground levels. There will be some Potentially some on-street parking along Park Street. They're not even asking to count that in because this site is located in the parking assessment district. So the only parking they're required to provide on site is for the residential units. As you'll see a little later, they're only required, I think, 74 parking spaces for the residential units, and they're providing 82. So they have more than they are required under the ordinance without counting any of the on-street parking. So we've already gone through what's already on site, the surface parking lot, the Hunter House business, and the city's small lot. Currently zone B4 and D4 in the downtown overlay. We did a review of all of the issues and plans that were submitted. With regards to this first floor plan, I'll show you on here. They are proposing to have all of the dumpsters located within the building, so they'll be fully screened. They're behind walls. Now, I do point out in the report that obviously there's windows nearby, so some views as you're walking down the street, you may be able to look in and see it, but there are solid walls immediately adjacent. There are 2 dumpster areas proposed, one for the office and residential and 2 retailers, and then this separate refuse area for whoever the retailer is that would be located on the corner. They're also being allocated 2 parking spaces for the retail use. They also have their 2 loading spaces provided in here, and that is you enter off the vehicular entry off of Park Street, which is 25 feet wide and does meet the requirement. You can't have more than a 25-foot wide opening. There's a glass overhead garage door that comes down, opens for people to go in and out. That's where the trucks can go in. So there is the 14 feet of clearance required for the trucks. One of the things I called out in the report is the loading spaces were only shown as 10 feet wide, but there was additional room. Clearly, it appeared that they could make them the required 12-foot in width. And the applicant contacted me today and indicated that they have new plans that will show the 12 feet. There is room. That was a mistake on their part. One thing I want to point out too, previously we had mentioned that they needed, I believe, 3 loading spaces, but with the change to the second floor and the reduction in the square footage of the office space, they only need 1 loading space. So they have 2, and they're both going to be 12 feet wide, but in any event, as required by ordinance, only one of them has to be that 40 by 12 by 14 feet in height. The parking, as I stated, is all being provided underground, and let me know what sheets you want to see, but I will put up the underground parking levels so you can see how they're laid out. And as I said, there's 82 spaces, 41 per floor. There's 2 ADA barrier-free spaces proposed on each level, which obviously the building department will review that when the time comes, but it's simply the ramp. Then there's this elevator shaft that goes to the basement, the 2 egress stairs. There's your 2 barrier-free spaces, 1 there and 1 there. Both levels are substantially the same. I will go, hopefully, to the second floor and just show you the proposed changes with regards to the breakdown of office and residential now on the second floor. Okay, so you can see here what used to be the entire second floor as office. They've now broken it down and they have 11 units, residential units proposed on that floor, and they've shrunk the office space. And so because of the office space only being 8,460 square feet now, it does mean that it has brought down their loading requirement as stated. Also, they have provided a roof plan now, which they didn't have previously. The roof plan shows all of the rooftop units that are proposed and the screening that's proposed. The only issue noted here with regards to that, the rooftop units that they're proposing are 7 feet in height, yet they have a screen wall proposed that is a total of 10 feet in height. And so that will have to, 10.5 feet in height. So that actually has to be reduced because you can only have a 10-foot high mechanical screen wall on the upper floor of the building. Even though they weren't over the maximum height, there's a separate rule that says that. The applicant did advise today that they do intend to lower that screen wall height to 10 feet. Will still sufficiently screen the units because they're only 7 feet in height. You can see that there is also an outdoor area proposed on the roof, which is permitted and is set back as required from the property lines. With regards to, let's see, some of the other mechanical equipment, if I go back to the site plan, you'll see there are 2 pieces of ground-mounted mechanical equipment on the site on the northwest corner. That's a transformer and a fuse box that's located right in this area here. The only issue there, those boxes or equipment cabinets, whatever you want to call them, are 6 feet in height. And the screening that they're proposing for those is all landscape materials, arborvitae and yews, I believe. Junipers, sorry. And the junipers were marked at 5 feet tall. They have to be increased to 6 feet because the units themselves are 6 feet. The applicant also advised today that they have amended their plans to show the 6 feet, and that was a mistake on their part and has been corrected. Some of the other landscaping proposed on the site, you can see here. Basically, we look at on a fully developed site like this in the downtown area, the only landscaping requirements per se are the street trees, and they're required to have 1 street tree for every 40 feet of linear frontage. Now they have a lot of, well, at least frontage in terms of being on a street around this building. And so they are required to have a total of 16 trees spread around the perimeter of this building. They are proposing 17, so they meet that requirement. They have 7 Bohall red maples along Maple and Hamilton, 5 American Century lindens on Park Street, and 5 Skyline honey locust along Woodward. So then there's also the little planting area I mentioned around the mechanical equipment on the ground. And then there are pockets of planting areas in the building here along the Maple streetscape. They also have 3 raised planter beds shown along the streetscape in the public right-of-way along Maple. And that is to match with the city's overall design for Maple that was done just over the past year or so. I think that's about it. The only other comment on the landscaping is the species are all permitted within the city. However, they are proposing the Stella d'Oro daylilies, which I know I sound like a broken record, but they have been so overused in the city that, you know, it'd be great if we could see something a little different than that. That's my opinion. Other comments with regards to the streetscape, I mentioned the street trees and the raised planters, but they are also proposing the pedestrian scale street lighting along Hamilton, Park, and Maple, which is required. And they do have that. The only comment there, and I have not received comments from the engineering department, and I tried to stalk them the last couple of days and I still was unsuccessful. So we're going to add a condition if you decide to approve this, compliance with the department's requirements. One thing I have a feeling they're going to note is the placement of the streetlights along Park. They're not as regular as they would generally like to see them. It is, however, a difficult edge given the vehicular entrance and a very large power pole of DTEs that's kind of in the way. So I just mentioned that though. Then there's also 2 bike racks that are shown on the plan, one in this corner here at Hamilton and Woodward, and then another one near the Park Street entrances. I believe they're bike racks. They state they're bike racks. And then there's a drawing shown of a circular element that appears to be a bike rack. I just asked them to clarify that yes, those are bike racks, and yes, they will use the city standard ones for downtown, which are not the circular ones. They're actually a black plastisol finished U-shape bike rack. That's the standard to be used in downtown Birmingham. So they would have to switch those. With regards to parking, back to that, as I mentioned, they're in the parking assessment district. So they, based on the number of units they have, which they now have a total of 53 units that are proposed within the building, 32 larger ones and 21 smaller ones, then they each have a different parking requirement per unit. Basically, with the unit spread that they have, they need 74 parking spaces and they have 82. So they have 8 extra parking spaces on site. And that's not even including the 2 in this area here, in this retail area, which I guess technically we could count those, to be fair, but we didn't because they're a little awkward and difficult to get to, especially if the loading zone was full. But in any event, so technically they have at least 8, maybe 10 extra spaces. All of the parking spaces require or do meet the requirement of 180 square feet in size. And we do have the handicap spaces in the lower levels, as I mentioned. I've already gone through the loading spaces and the size issue there that the applicant has indicated they will correct. With regards to vehicular access and circulation, as I mentioned, they have the entrance off of Park Street right here in the building, 25 feet wide for cars to get in and out, including the loading and the trash vehicles. You can see that the space within is larger to accommodate trucks and trash trucks picking up trash, etc. But there's only the one access point for meetings. When they had other access points for vehicles, if you remember, they had one on Hamilton, there was one on Woodward at one time, and then that surface parking lot took out a large portion of the retail there. That had been removed, so there's no issue there. With regards to pedestrian access and circulation, they have multiple entrances proposed. There's actually 12 pedestrian entrances. 5 of them are along Park. For the 2 retail spaces, the office lobby and the residential lobby. They also have 6 others along Woodward to serve the retailer that might be proposed at the corner, which would be the northeast corner. They have 2 to serve the loading area and act as egress for the residential and office entries. And then there's another retail, 2 retail entries actually down towards the southeast corner of that large retail space in the southern end of the building. Also, it's important to note that the applicant has shown a sidewalk all around the entire building, which is certainly what's required. We have had instances in the past where people have not wanted to add the sidewalk along Woodward, that they are proposing to add the sidewalk as required along Woodward. With regards to the photometric plans, there are a couple of comments that I had on the photometric plan, and I'll just I believe somebody asked if there was any of those style fixtures around town and other locations, and
Jana,
I found out just this afternoon.
Jana, you're
that yes,
breaking
there
up.
are. There are some on.
Jana, hey, Jana, you have
Yes,
broken up.
yes.
You broke up quite a bit as you started to talk about lights. You're really going in and out. Could you start
Okay.
again with the
Can you hear me
photometric?
now?
Yes, it's really quite choppy though.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Huh. Okay. I don't know what to say. It doesn't even show that it's going out on my end. Okay, so the photometric plan, the comments there, they are proposing some light fixtures that are fin style for basically architectural detail to the building. They're showing, the photometric plan only shows 9 of those fixtures on the north elevation, but at my count, from looking at all the elevations they provided, there's actually 23 of those fixtures proposed on.
Disappeared again.
Yeah, she did.
Back.
No.
Jana, can you hear us?
Yes.
Try it again, Jana.
Can you hear me?
Right now we
Yes.
can, yes.
But you were breaking up badly before.
Speak more slowly.
For 30 seconds, and I will go and talk to someone else who might be using the internet in my house.
Yeah.
Somebody's in trouble.
Yeah. Why don't you take a pause or go get better internet in Royal Oak?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, pause for 1 minute, and I will go make sure no one else is on the Wi-Fi in my house.
Okay.
All right, we will do so. we'll be taking a brief pause.
Mr. Chairman, while we're taking a brief pause, can I sort of reiterate Stuart's comments of the last meeting in which he made the comment that the engineering department now at least twice has failed to provide comments timely. So we either need to lengthen the time period in which the materials are submitted, or we need to figure out what the problem is with the engineering department now that it's been outsourced. This is unacceptable on a continuing basis, and I think the city manager has got to know that.
Duly noted. Duly noted and hopefully minuted, please.
On it.
All right, let's hope for better luck. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sounds better already.
They all denied being on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, of course we did.
Okay, yeah. Given the number of devices in this house, I don't believe it. But anyway, all right. So back to the photometric. Let me get the photometric back up. Do you want me to talk slower in case it does that again?
Sure.
Faster.
Faster? Okay. The issue that I call out with regard to the photometric is the number of lights that are shown. They only show 9 of them on the photometric along the Park in Maple elevations, but the elevation drawings themselves show 23. So I would ask that they clarify that, and we can ask the applicant. Although in talking to the applicant today, he did indicate that in fact, those light fin fixtures don't actually produce enough light to warrant showing on the photometric plan because they're so small. And also I had indicated that they might not be deemed cutoff fixtures, but I believe the architect for the applicant will be talking to you to discuss the style of the fixture. It's actually a very thin shaft of light that's buried within a casing, so you barely see anything that comes out and just provides like a glow to add to the architecture. So I don't think from what I heard this afternoon that you even need to provide, consider an exception to allow the non-cutoff fixtures, but you can take that up with the applicant when they come on. Comments from the departments, as I mentioned, the engineering department's comments are pending. So whatever we do, we're going to have to make sure that we add a condition should you move forward for the applicant to comply with those comments. The fire department did provide some comments. It's their standard ones: provide a Knox box, provide a separate command center, fully sprinkle the building, this kind of thing. The police department does not have any concerns, nor does the Department of Public Services. The building department pointed out that there was a couple of issues, and that's on the occupied roof, that there would need to be access to both exit stairs in accordance with a section in the building code, and that the 2 exits from the office space on the 2nd floor will need to be separated. Also a building code requirement. Am I still getting a strong signal?
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Now that you kicked the kids off.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Okay, so now I am going to move to the elevation so we can get into the design review portion of the discussion. And the materials that are proposed, I will put those up in a second. They're proposing an onyx iron spot utility size brick. One thing I had asked was for them to call out the size of the utility sized brick. And the architect indicated today that those bricks are 4 inches by 4 inches by 12 inches. So they're not the jumbo brick, but they are a slightly different size from what you would normally see. So you can talk to them about that when the time comes. They indicated that size bricks is also used on their building on Woodward and Maple, and also on 191 Chester. And so they've been approved in the past. They're also proposing a walnut travertine stone for the building with accent areas, gray limestone accents as well, primarily on the vertical building elements, a zinc patina painted aluminum panel on several points on the building as accents, black painted metal canopies on all different sides of the building, and clear insulated glass for windows with anodized aluminum frames. I will put up the materials sheet. There you can see, I know you can't touch them, but there are the materials and the colors that are proposed for the building. So here's the iron spot brick, so it's a dark gray, the travertine stone, the limestone, painted canopies, metal panels. You'll note that I did ask them to provide the specifications on the clear glass. They did not provide any VLT readings on that, and they will be required to show that to make sure that it does meet the city's requirements for visual light transmittance, and it does have to be clear glass. They do indicate that it is in fact clear glass. Also, we have to look at a review of the entire building for the percentages of glazing. On the first floor, they have to have at least 70% glazing when they front a street, which they do on all sides.
Certainly do.
And they have met that. And there was an issue with that in one of the earlier reviews. They've corrected it. So they meet the 70% minimum on the first floor all around the building. And they also meet the maximum 35% of glazing on all the upper floors around the building. So all of the glazing requirements have been met, with the exception of providing the spec sheets that show the VLT requirement has been met. One thing to point out on this is they didn't propose any signage, and obviously not everybody does when they come in with a new building, but the interesting thing to note is that the most logical place for signage on this building might be on the canopies there, and if they do wish to use those canopies for signs, then they would be considered too large to be canopy signs. So just some food for thought for them. There's nothing wrong with them if they don't put the signage on them. They're perfectly fine. There's no size requirement, but should they decide to do that in the future, that'd be something for them to think about. Also, the canopies project 2 feet into the public property at 2 locations, or at 2 of the corners. So we would ask that the planning board consider approving that projection, which based on the changes to the ordinance that we made a few years ago, you have the ability to approve up to a 2-foot projection for canopies. Another interesting note, as I showed when the site plan was up, the applicant is proposing to go over, under, and on city property, public property, both at the northwest corner of the site where the existing surface parking lot is, and also pushing under the road, Maple and Park a little ways, and squaring off their building a little bit along Park. So they would have to enter into a lease agreement with the city, and that would have to be approved by the city commission. The last time we met with them, they had started that process but hadn't gotten very far. Their attorney has been working with the city attorney, and they have agreed on all the terms. So they're all ready to go to the city commission now and see if the city commission is willing to approve the lease. Basically, all of the city attorney's requirements have been met. So you would still, if you decide to move forward tonight, want to add a condition that they have to enter into a lease agreement with the city that's approved by the city commission. So that's to come at a later date, but they have apparently worked out all of the details on that. Also, just to point out, this location in town is deemed a terminating vista under the 2016 plan. So obviously we want to see something on that corner that's going to provide some architectural interest, some mass, some height, and also the 2016 plan gets into discussion about how I believe it calls them twin buildings, gateway buildings. So if you were on Maple going west, going across Big Woodward, when you come in, you want to feel like you're entering downtown Birmingham, and the 2016 plan actually recommends 2 sort of matching scale and sized buildings. And the Greenleaf Trust building is on the south side of Maple, and it's a 5-story building. This is also a 5-story building proposed for this corner. So I think it would very nicely provide the strong gateway entrance into downtown Birmingham that the 2016 plan recommends. So that's, I believe, the review for tonight. And essentially what we're recommending is that you consider approving the final site plan and design for 35001 Woodward and 35075 Woodward with the following conditions. 1, that the city commission approves a lease agreement with the applicant to use public property. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th ones that were shown in the report, we can strike, or you can leave them in, and they will be submitting revised plans to show that they've lowered the rooftop screening to 10 feet. They've increased the width of the loading spaces to 12 feet, and they've increased the height of the junipers around the transformer and fuse box to 6 feet in height, all of which they've agreed to do. Then the next condition would be that the applicant correct the photometric plan and elevations just for accuracy and consistency to show all proposed features or fixtures, sorry, or if it's in fact they have a light spec sheet on the fixture that shows that it does not actually produce any noticeable foot candles, to add that note to the photometric plan so that we're all clear on that. Next, add a condition that the applicant provide dimensions for the proposed utility size brick and further specifications on the clear glazing, and get administrative approval for same. I have told you the information on the brick size. It's slightly larger than a normal brick, but it is not a jumbo size brick. I don't believe you have to approve non-cutoff fixtures given the description I was given by the applicant on the fin lights. And the last two, that the planning board approve the 2-foot projection for the steel canopies marked on the plans. And lastly, that the applicant comply with the requests of all city departments.
Excellent, Jana, thank you. I would suggest, board, that if we do get to a motion to recommend approval, that we probably keep all but number 7 in there just for a clear record and make sure that we get the revised documents. With that, questions for staff? Is that Mr. Williams?
I just wanted to make an observation over the many morphing projects or proposed projects we've looked at. We started originally several years ago with the concern about traffic at Maple and Big Woodward. I'm pleased to point out, one, that there's no longer a hotel being proposed, and residential, and the entrance to the residential area underground is now well away from the traffic bottlenecks on Maple and Woodward. I think that's a very positive development. And also, by the change to more residential, we are, in essence, in providing significantly more parking on site, we're taking some pressure off the parking system. I think both of those things are worth noting in the minutes and for the public to be paying attention to. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other comments or questions for staff before we go to the applicant? Mr. Kozik.
Question, is there a, it showed a roof plan, but it did not show the stairs, the elevators serving that roof.
And that was the very point raised by the building department, that they would have to have egress of the stairs from the rooftop.
But my point goes further. By the way, I think they probably need access to 2 stairs because they're going to have more than 50 people up there. And so, I mean, that's a building code thing. They show terraces wrapping around the mechanical screen. So I suppose it's conceivable they show landscaping, sort of barricading, access to, but my interest was more, don't we cap the amount of area for the stair lobby and elevator? I'm just curious what happens in that box, but it sounds like we don't have those drawings. I mean, I can imagine a stair and an elevator and something else, but I know there were some space limitations.
You're correct. Specifically for elevator lobbies, there's a maximum size, and it can't be larger, if I remember correctly, than the size of the elevator shaft itself.
Right.
So we would have to get further details on that to verify that they're going to meet the requirements. And I think that's what the building department's calling out as well. We need better details on how to access the rooftop.
Right, but I think I'm less interested in the building code, more interested in our zoning.
Correct.
Criteria. So there's not enough information to check that, if you will. The other thing is, if you can go to the rendering that shows the building along with the Greenleaf Trust building. I think it's a couple of pieces down there. Keep going. Keep going. A little bit further.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, so if you could zoom in on the upper, I don't know if you can zoom in, but the upper right.
Upper right.
corner. And so one of the things in regards to and by the way, I think it's a beautiful building, beautiful materials. But in terms of, does it fit the criteria that's required under the zoning requirements, architectural standards in the overlay district? So specific item E, architectural standards, there's item A. So it says facade openings, including porches, windows, colonnades, shall be vertical in proportion. So let me just focus on facade openings, windows. So if you look at the Greenleaf Trust building, I think that complies. If you look at those windows, those are individual windows that have more of a vertical proportion than they have a horizontal proportion. So on the proposed building, this has a very horizontal sort of bias, if you will. And so what's considered a window, as I look at the fenestration on floors 3 and 4,
Right.
Those are ribbon windows in my mind, is what an architect would call it. Yeah, there's a white section there that breaks it up, but even if you look at the shape of what's in that, that's clearly more horizontal than it is vertical. And if you look at the maybe a little bit harder to see here, but I'm not sure if you consider the base a colonnade. I don't think it's really, it's more of a structural base spacing, but those are, if you look at the direct elevations, they're more horizontal. So this building, unlike Greenleaf Trust, which has a very urban, sort of stacked building with, the components that make up the building, the piers, the fenestration, has these sort of vertical extrusions, vertical expressions, and you put this building next to it, this gateway building, and this looks like a beautiful new building that I would picture on Wayne State University's campus, to be honest. I mean, it looks more like it doesn't look, so in my mind,
Bert, can I ask you a question? Isn't part of the distinction here between the two buildings that floors 3 and 4 in the Greenleaf Trust building are office, and floors 3 and 4 here are residential, which almost by necessity is going to have more of, I'm not disagreeing with your point, but it's going to have more of a horizontal look if it's residential.
Well, yeah, I'm just, in my mind, on Greenleaf Trust, you do have floors
4 and 5.
4 and 5 are,
but mostly 5, at least under.
Well, and 4, I've been up there, so 4 and 5 is residential. But if you forget that, I just go back to our standards, architectural standards. So requirements. It says all buildings shall be subject to the following physical requirements. Item 8, if I just focus on, facade openings, porches, windows, colonnades shall be vertical in proportion. And I guess I'd like the architect to get up and say, how does, if we look at these windows, the ordinance doesn't say if it's residential, you treat it differently, or if it's office, you treat it differently. It says that windows shall be vertical in proportion. So this building has a very So in my mind, it doesn't. I think it's a beautiful building. I think there's a reason why our ordinance, why we have these overlay standards, and I think this goes against the grain of what's in those standards. So that's everything else. They've knocked it out of the park here. So.
Okay. Well, we will get the applicant up in a moment to talk about that. Are there any other questions for Jana before we move on to the architect? Seeing none. I thought I saw Mr. Biddison here. Would he or the owner's representative care to come forward and provide any other? There we are. Mr. Biddison, Dr. Gayer, welcome. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or perhaps you could answer some of the questions, or talk about what Mr. Kozak brought up?
Sure, be happy to. Just a couple of things that Jana had mentioned. obviously the bike racks, we more than happy to use the in-city standard. This was a rack that we had used on the last building over on 191 Chester. So no issue with that, using a different rack for that. The clear glazing standard will obviously be met, so no issue with that as well. We'll present that paperwork to planning just so that they have that as part of the process. On the roof plan, the box in the center is where the elevator and stairs would directly come up within the center portion of the building. And then I think what we would need to provide would be an access path. The north stair is outside of the roof screen, so we would be able to access that from around the outside of that, and we would provide a path to do so, to meet building standards, and we'd be happy to have that continuing conversation with them. Relative to the light elements on the building, this is a detail that we used at the 100 Woodward building a few years ago that was approved. It's a very fine indirect lighting element that's in about 4 or 5 inches inside an aluminum extrusion. So it's basically just a very light detail, accent detail. It's not something that you could even quantify in terms of a photometric plan in terms of providing light on the ground level. So it wasn't previously, we didn't use that on the photometric, and it wasn't added into this one. But we'd be more than happy to get you some additional information on the small LED piece that goes inside, but it's totally shielded, and it's just a reflection of what's inside. Regarding Bert's comments on the elevation on the exterior of the building, one of the things with this building, honestly, is that it's more than double the length of the Greenleaf building. So anything that we do, it's going to look a little bit more horizontal. I do understand that the elements are a little less what I'll call punched openings within that surface. But I think if you look at the building in smaller elements as well, there's very much a verticality to the elements between the windows, to the bigger piers that are on the grade level. If you look at the other rendering images, when you're on the ground level as well, it's very much a rhythm of the vertical column elements along both street levels. And we felt that there were a number of very vertical elements all the way around the building, even though the window elements were perhaps wider than the punched openings on the building next door. So for a building that's more than double the width, north to south, we still feel that this has a significant amount of verticality to it, in perhaps in a little bit smaller detail, because the building is a little bit visually less massive, I guess, in terms of the quantity of full stone with punched openings. But we felt that the materials that were used were in keeping with that building and the spirit of what is being required under the ordinance. And we think it's going to be a great building and be a great other half to that gateway. And I think having a little bit of let's say variety throughout the city, which I think we've always in our work tried to do, because I think it makes for a more interesting environment overall. And I'm more than happy to chat more about that, but that's where we were coming from, and we feel that it would be a great addition to the city. I'm trying to think, I don't remember anything else that I jotted down, but if you have any other specific questions, more than happy to answer them. We're very excited to be to this point. Finally, it's been a long road trying to work through the avenues here, but we're excited to hopefully see this move forward and bring something new to the city.
Thank you, Kevin. Questions for the architect or the owner? Ms. Boyce.
Kevin, I have a question about how complete the interior plans are of the units, and I ask that because I noticed maybe 2 or 3 of the floors don't have washers and dryers in their units.
Everything would have a washer and dryer in it. So if there should be a mechanical room with washer dryer in every unit. So that will be the case if there's for some reason something that didn't get shown on there.
Okay, so the plan is always that this will be someone's like permanent residence. It's not
Absolutely. Yep.
short-term lease arrangement or anything like that.
No.
Thank you.
Good question. Mr. Scher.
Mr. Biddison, I'm not really sure I understand the way the windows are going to be installed. When I look on the drawing, for example, page 68 or 69, the second and third, sorry, be the third and fourth floors, some of the window groupings look like there are 3 separate panels of glass. And I think more toward the south side of the building, there's a couple that are just 2. But when I look at the drawing that you focused, or that Mr. Kozak focused on, it looked more like it was a single pane of glass in each of these larger openings.
It would not be a single pane of glass. There, we would definitely have vertical mullions broken up. We would not be able to provide windows that would be that wide.
All right, so the page 68, 69 is what is what it would look like to somebody close to the building looking up, seeing something.
Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Other questions for the applicant? Mr. Boyle.
Yes, this is a question for either of the applicant or the architect. I'd like a fuller explanation as to the rooftop use. It's not entirely clear what is included in the plan, and I'd also like to know how this space would be used by, I assume, the residents and not the businesses in the property. Just like to get a better handle on that. This is an issue that's come up in the past in terms of storage, in terms of the type of facilities that you're considering offering, and I know that the Commission is interested in the same.
Okay, so yes, this definitely is a residential, or I'm sorry, a building resident used facility. This is not for the general public. The access would be up through the indoor elevators for the residents to use that space. It basically provides sitting areas outside, areas where they could eat. We have talked about the possibility of, the fact there could be, some type of a small kitchenette area or something that could be, for residents to, have access to up there, but it's pretty much just outside area where they can get to some green space and, relaxing space. It's not a pool. It's not, a bar or a nightclub up there. It's really just kind of outdoor space. I'm assuming they could walk a dog up there if they had one and it went up to there as opposed to going to the street. Not a real heavy use, and certainly not a restaurant that's going to be accessed from the general public.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you very much. Please stick around. If we have anything else, we'll come back to you, but I appreciate your time. At this moment, we will open this up to public comment. So if you are a member of the public and you wish to comment, please use your raise hand function at the bottom of the center console for Zoom. I will call your name. Please introduce yourself and where you're located and provide your brief comments. I see we have one hand up. Friend of the program, Mr. Bloom. Welcome, Mr. Bloom.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Klein. I have a question and then some comments. By my calculations, and I expect that I'm going to be wrong, there is a deficit in this building of 76 spaces for the not the residential, but for the office and the retail uses. And I'm assuming that all of the retail spaces are 300 square feet per space required. Assuming that this was not in the parking district, I understand is it in the assessment district, but if it wasn't, I'm trying to figure out what the deficit to the parking would be for the office and for the retail spaces. And I did a rough calculation and I've got 76 spaces.
Okay, I don't know that we have that calced out because to be fair, it is not a deficit or something that is required. If you are talking in the theoretical, it would certainly have to follow the ordinance, and retail, general retail would be at one rate, and Jana, I believe restaurant would be at another, and office at a third, quite frankly, correct? So, but to be fair, there is no deficit in this particular case, just since it is located within the assessment district.
Okay, so
did you have some comments too?
My comment.
Sure.
Yeah, yes, I do. First of all, it would be really nice to see this corner have more development. So I'm not against, before I make my main comments, I'm not against development. I am really concerned about the parking issue. This is not theoretically and legal. Yes, it's in the assessment district as the rules are now. They don't need to provide parking, but that doesn't make the problem go away. That resolution, that law is not a magic wand that all of a sudden just takes care of the parking problems. And by my calculations, this is going to add a 76 space deficit. And the planning board received some documents, I think Monday night or Friday, showing what the Daxton has done to the use of Peabody and Pierce structures. And this structure would certainly impact Peabody. Showing what the proposed RH would do. And then the Kajoyan building that's going up where the former varsity shop is creating a deficit of 49 or 50 spaces. So we're out of parking and we can, like I said, I'd like this corner developed, but we're out of parking and we continue to approve. It's like Sergeant Schultz and Hogan's Heroes. I know nothing, I see nothing. We're approving all this stuff, but there's no parking for it. And it's funny to hear it and it's funny to, okay, but we have a really big problem that we need to solve. So, and I think that we would be remiss to approve this, particularly since the city would be leasing land and then and hose these developers over and say, oh, we've got a problem, we've got to fix, and not do the same for the other people. So the issue has been raised. Everybody knows about it now or will, and we need to figure out a way to take care of it. And hopefully it won't derail the development, but we really need to do something. In terms of this building, when you drive by that corner, although I said it needs development, that Hunter House building is iconic. And this takes it away. And I'd like to see, this issue has been brought before. I'd like to see some homage to that building. And there were comments that this is a very nice looking building. I'm not an architect, I'm not a designer. This looks to me like a high-end building, but it doesn't have any character to me and it doesn't accent that area, that gateway to Birmingham. And I'd like to see more done in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Moving along, Mr. Cobb, Mr. Kelly Cobb, if you could, there you are, sir, welcome.
Hi, everybody, Kelly Cobb, Hunter House Hamburgers in Birmingham. It's Groundhog Day again. Good to see you all. I'll be brief and just remind everybody that this development is in clear and unambiguous violation of the deed restrictions on the use of the Hunter House property. I understand you consider it a civil matter, and I understand where the board is at on that and why, but it needs to be said. And if this continues to move forward, the development is headed toward litigation. It's not headed toward construction. It's headed to a courtroom. Why the developer can't communicate with me about using the Hunter House site, let alone meet the requirements of the deed restriction. I simply do not understand. It leaves me with no choice but to sue. I have approval rights, and yet I find out about what's happening from these notices and not from the developer. There are at least 6 major deed restriction violations that are proposed in this plan. More, actually, that's not exhaustive, but at least 6 major ones. And I won't bore you with them all, but the major one at the first and foremost, before he's even supposed to submit these plans, he is supposed to have Hunter House's approval. No approval was sought, no approval was given. I share Mr. Bloom's comments. I want a development on this corner. This project does not work. This project does not meet Hunter House's needs. It does not meet the deed restrictions on the use of the property, and it is not what's going to be built here. And it is such a profound waste of your time, your expertise, my time, everyone's time, Kevin Biddison's time, because it's not going to happen. And so it's profoundly disappointing to me that we're just here over and over and over and over and over again without anyone actually working constructively, frankly, except for me, to solve this problem. So that's all I have to say today. I don't want to go the route that this is heading. I know you all understand in depth the situation, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk and you listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cobb, of course. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else from the public care to provide any comment on this development? And I'll go once around. I do not see any other hands coming up, so we will bring it back to the board. Excuse me. Board, any discussion? Anyone want to start the discussion? No? Is that Mr. Jeffries? You're kind of off frame there, sir.
Oh, sorry. I'm sitting here thinking about Bert's comments and looking at that and thinking how long we've waited to have that sister building that provides that gateway into Birmingham. And, sometimes it's like something didn't seem quite right, but when Bert pointed out the horizontal versus the vertical thing, and then once you start thinking about it, and a lot of times, we approve buildings and then you see it and go, gosh, I didn't look like anything like it. But, maybe that's the magic of fire and architect, I guess. But yeah, I got to agree. I don't see that as a complementary building. I do, I don't disregard Mr. Biddison's comments that, we want some variety, but our master plan kind of specifically called out trying to make that where those 2 buildings know each other. And I don't get that. I don't get that really at all on those 2. Again, nice building and all, I think, I don't like the ribbon windows. I mean, we've got few of them places where we have those and they're not great, but I don't know.
Other comments from members of the board? Part of this, Mr. Kozik.
Yeah, I'll just come back again. We've seen this multiple times from a general site planning, building organization, all the components. I think they've gotten there. There's no question about it. This is much, much better than the last time we saw it and the time we saw it before it and the time we saw it before that from a site planning standard. But, there's a reason that the ordinance in the overlay district is written a specific way. So we can, so what's a window opening? A ribbon window that's, we have a couple of these buildings that were built back in, the 80s in our town. Probably none of us love those buildings necessarily, but, it could have a window that's 5 foot high or an opening that's 5 foot high by 80 feet long. And then they divide the windows because nobody makes glass that big. So you divide the windows into 3 foot sections. So what is the window opening? Is it the glass that gets inserted into a frame, or is it the opaque part, the wall, if you will, and the opening within it? So I don't disagree. Well, I disagree with some of Mr. Biddison's comments you know, if you look at the building envelope here and compare it to Greenleaf Trust, not that that's where I would set the bar. This building is maybe 20% bigger. You know, its facade, as you see it from Woodward or Peabody, is longer, but the ordinance didn't say if you had a building that's a little bit longer, then you can fudge with the rules. If I think of the Daxton, you know, it's a fairly long elevation, but if you look at what they've done with their fenestration, you know, they've taken a horizontal building form and created vertical elements within it. It's not, so I know what is being presented here doesn't have to be destroyed and you start over. This is a, you know, I'll call it, these are tweaks, and the building materials are, you know, in fact, I'm scared you're going to come back someday and go, oh, guess what? We couldn't afford stone. You know, so these are high quality materials. They're very complementary to Greenleaf Trust. I love that. I love the general shape and proportion, but, you know, I know why the ordinance was written the way it is. I don't look at item 8 and say, my God, what was Wani thinking when that ended up in the ordinance, or the commissioners who approved that? There's a reason for that. And, you know, so in my mind, and it's a beautifully designed building. I mean, the way you've played with proportions and materials, but it has a horizontal bias. You know, I see that, like I said, it reminds me of, you know, much of the work that I see done on university campuses. It's a pretty serious building. And, you know, as I say that, it also looks like a building you want to drive by at 50 miles an hour, not necessarily walk by at 3 miles an hour. So, you know, I give them a 10 out of 10 on every other aspect of our ordinance. It's just that one piece. And I'm all for a variety of architecture. Mr. Biddison's done some incredible work in our downtown that is very different than the building next to it and across the street. And I think that's a good thing. So I'm not suggesting this has to become a traditional building with quote unquote punched windows. What I'm suggesting is that the way the broader elements are composed and the openings, it has a substantial horizontal bias. And I think our ordinance clearly is asking for something different than that. So I'll end with that.
Okay, others on the board, opinions? Ms. Boyce.
I hear what everyone's saying, and I don't disagree, but I actually very much like the building. It has more of a focus of a purpose of what it is to be, and it's a residential building primarily, which I'm excited about because we've been asking for this sort of thing for a long time. And I like that it's not overly decorated and with a lot of ornamentation. I think that there are other examples in town where our newer projects have too much detail, too much ornament. And so I appreciate this about this building design, especially. One question I do have though, and perhaps it's coming off even more of a horizontal feel because it's so large, and in the elevations and the drawings that Kevin has provided, it's hard to understand just how large and how wide the vertical elements are. In particular, the limestone pieces that are every third window. You know, maybe he can talk to us a little bit about the width of that I think it was chocolate travertine or walnut travertine, just to give us a little bit more of an understanding. The elevation makes it look like it might be small, but I think it probably is not. And also the mountains between the panes of glass, what sort of a width will we be seeing on those? If he doesn't mind answering those questions, it would be helpful to me.
Good questions. Is Mr. Biddison available?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hang on, let me see. I got myself turned off here, I think. Okay. Yes, the scale of the building is a large building. It really is. If you look at some of the closer rendering views, say from Maple looking to the east, you understand kind of the scale of what's sitting on that corner. And I feel honestly that we have addressed the public, I think, better than even Greenleaf has. Greenleaf seems like more of a bunker that doesn't really address the pedestrian to any great degree on the backside. And I think the ability to have large scale items and small scale items like mullions are good, but the size of the stone elements starting on the lower level are over 3 feet wide. As you move up, they thin out to a couple of feet, and the mullions on the glass will be those are going to be narrow pieces of aluminum that you're familiar with, and they would be coming out a couple of inches from the face of the glass. But the various sizes of the stone elements, whether they're wall masses or individual vertical piers that are 3+ feet at the pedestrian level, especially, you get the feel of the building in the massive scale, and that's honestly where the pedestrian meets the building. From the view of Woodward Avenue. Woodward Avenue is a 50-mile-an-hour road, whether we want it to be or not. And honestly, when you're driving at that speed, to me, you're not really taking notice of, punched openings or smaller detail. You're looking at larger swaths of material and larger planes of surface and things that are happening within the building facade. Again, the fact that this building is twice the length along Woodward does make a difference, because you are, this building is still going to seem horizontal, even if we change it, just because when you look at that view that we were looking at, you're looking at an elevation at that building. If you start to look at the building from other directions, it has 4 sides to this building. And when you look at the interest of the materials and the surfaces and the planes and how it plays in and out, up and down with the scale of materials, I think you have to look at it from all sides of the building. And I think you have to look at it from the corner and as well from the north end. It's different on all sides, and it addresses the street level differently on all sides. It addresses Woodward differently and perhaps in a different scale than the corner at Maple and Park Street. So we feel that there's a lot of variance in scale. We feel that it is a very large building, and it's we feel that we've handled the materials in a way that we think the materials are materials that are used in the building next door and used in other buildings in the area. There's brick buildings directly to the north of it. That's the smaller scale material. The larger stone material we've pulled as well into the corner. I just feel like we, I think it's a building that's you have to look at from all angles and not just one direction. I'm not sure if that answered your question or not, but you can You can bring up another one if you want, I'm sure.
Ms. Boyce?
If I just might follow up, and it's not really a question because you did answer it, thank you. But just, I guess I'd like to say maybe for the future, the color palette of the elevations doesn't really reflect the materials that are in your materials board as well as I think it could. And I think if, unless I'm mistaken, but these limestone piers, for example, they're the walnut material, no? And they're white. So the way you decided to color it puts an extreme horizontal emphasis on the elevations. But if the vertical elements were colored differently, I think it would feel different. I know it would feel different to look at. So just an observation. I like the building very much, but I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other discussion by the board? Mr. Scher.
I guess I have two unrelated points. The first is to repeat something that we have said on several occasions. And since Mr. Cobb raised it again, I think it bears repeating. Whatever action we take is without regard to whatever dispute the Hunter House and the developer have. We are siding with nobody, and an approval means nothing with regard to whatever dispute they have. So that's something we've said before. I want to be sure everybody in the audience and the combatants here understand that we are not to be used as our decision isn't a sword or a shield for anybody. With regard to the building, I guess I was going to make the same point that it looks different to me, and I don't have the aesthetic training that Janelle and Bert have from the north and south elevation than it does on the east and west elevation. And to me, between the limestone elements and the length of the brick and the travertine stone, it has and with at least if I understand these light fins correctly, with the addition of the light fins, particularly at night, it's going to the extent you're away from it, it's going to draw the view up rather than out. So I'm not troubled about the building itself except for one question I'm going to ask Bert in a minute. With regard to whether it's complementary or not to the Greenleaf Trust building, I think the lens that I would look at in terms of whether a building like this is complementary is a fairly wide one. Are the materials complementary? Is the mass complementary? Is the scale of the building complementary? I have my own opinion as to whether Greenleaf is a better looking building than this building, but that's really not relevant. And the first person to construct their building on a corner like this shouldn't be able to dictate all the details of what the second building is to be. So I'm not bothered by that. But I guess, Bert, the one thing I'd like to hear from you is, you mentioned that it's clear what the purpose of the verticality of the openings are. So I guess it's not clear to me, what were you referring to?
Are you referencing my reading of the ordinance?
Yes.
Again, it says facade opening. So what's the definition of an opening? My sense of it is you've got a solid wall and you create an opening, you carve an opening into it. And so those openings, goes on to say porches, windows, colonnades shall be vertical in proportion. So if something's 15 foot wide, it should be at least 16 foot tall. And, if you're, I'm not a big historical architect, but, this comes out of, sort of town planning in that and probably has a bit of a traditional bias toward it. But that those openings, those carve outs, those expressions, however they're framed, have more of a vertical bias than horizontal. So so I don't know if I answered your question. I agree with you, by the way. It's and maybe this is by design. If you do look at the north and south elevations, there's a lot of vertical expression going on, especially, if you look at the rendering with the southwest perspective image. I mean, there's a collision of lots of forms and materials, and that clearly have a vertical expression. So I think so. Now, if I've answered your question, it's
maybe not completely. So maybe I misunderstood what you were saying. I thought that you were saying that there was a, beyond simply the definitional, that there was a, how should I phrase this, an object to be achieved by doing that. That by having verticality, it achieved, I don't even know what it was, pedestrian scale, I'm not quite sure, but that there was a reason that an object to be achieved by putting that into the ordinance, other than merely.
Right, and I think it just creates a, maybe a good way to describe it is, look at the building to the north of this one with these, it's a very sort of suburban appearance. And I don't know if you go back to, 2,000 years ago, maybe it's because, a lintel could only be so long or something, but it's sort of just a vocabulary. If you were to go to, cities throughout America, I think that's typically how buildings were built. And they often weren't mega block, projects. They were built in 20-foot sections like townhouses or something. I don't know. So I don't want to, it's, to me, this is not about modern or ornamentation or material choice. It's, and I love, as I said, I love other aspects about this project. I like it much better than a gravel parking lot. Would love to see it happen, but I'm, at least for me, I feel that if it's written in our ordinance, we could all interpret things our own different ways, but I'm troubled sometimes to just dismiss something because it's like, hey, I want to see this project happen or something like that. And I see these as not substantial changes. It's a little bit of an articulation. So, but I don't, I have my view, and I don't want to, I'm not trying to shift anybody else's views on this, but so.
No, I appreciate that. I'm just trying to get a better feel for it. Thanks.
Other comments by any other board members?
I do. I have one question.
Ms. Boyce?
That's sort of a question, comment for maybe Jana can help me with. I know Kevin stated that the third and fourth floor units are meant to have washers and dryers in them. And not so much that I care about the washer and dryer. I just want to be sure that, it's understood that the units are maybe not sort of a hotel style. And or if they are going to be, I'd also like to know that. But if we approve this tonight or move this forward tonight as it is shown, and there aren't, say, washer and dryer called out on the third and fourth floors, for example, then, I mean, is that okay? And does the applicant have to explain for certain if these will be, how they will be leased, if they could be leased, say, monthly or weekly, or is that part of what they would tell us as far as
Well,
how to use it?
the presence or lack of washers and dryers are not, they're not a requirement, obviously. If you want to see them there and that's your specific concern, to make sure that they're full units for dwelling, not hotels, rent by the night kind of thing, then you could add that to one of the conditions, but it's not a requirement of the zoning ordinance that they have washer and dryer, or that they define whether they're going to rent them by the day, the week, or the month, or the year, or sell them. Now, we've often asked that question and had it discussed during your review, but the ordinance doesn't require one or the other. So if you have a strong feeling one way or another, you might want to add that as a condition.
Okay, thank you.
Jan, a point of clarification of what you just said. Since this is not a special land use permit, to my knowledge, are we allowed to add conditions that are not requirements of the zoning ordinance?
Well, if it's related to land use and you can make that argument, I think you could give it a try.
Count 14.
Here, I have no plan to.
Fair enough.
We're setting up the city to be joined in the lawsuit.
Yeah, seriously. Other comments from any other board members? There are a couple who have not. Mr. Boyle, your hand is up.
I can't resist chipping in, and I won't take up too much of your time. We have been, let me rephrase that. I have been discussing this particular site for 25% of my life. This matter came up on the very first meeting I ever attended as a member of the planning board.
That was 1848.
Yeah. The fact that we are discussing tonight whether it has laundry facilities on the fourth floor or verticality as against horizontal is wonderful that we have reached this stage. I would ask people to be serious for 1 minute, however, about what we are talking about. I've said this at least a dozen times. This is the most important site in Southeast Michigan. It really is. And we have an opportunity to build a glorious building on this corner. And I would urge people not to make perfection the enemy of the possible. Let us move this forward. Let's take this to the next level. If it ends up in the court of law, then hey, it's America. Let's do it. But from our perspective as a planning board, it meets many, if not all, of the conditions we ask for in this area. And for the next 25% of my life, if I'm still here, I'd love to see this site occupied.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. Mr. Jeffries?
Yeah, I agree with Robin that this is an extremely important site. And I'm just thinking back of some perhaps projects that maybe we should have taken a little bit more time with. This one has been here for a long time. I don't have a sense of saving a month on this thing or a few weeks on this thing at the expense of maybe making it better match the ordinance and the intent of our master plan. And so I personally am not going to support this tonight. And Bert may not have tried to convince, but but he brought up a point that was there, and I had not fully. There was something that bothered me, and I think of that. And if you look, I went to Google Maps, and I'm looking. This building looks like it matches much better with 440 Park, which is not a fantastic building. It was built, when just straight glass, especially on the Park side. I think it could be better. And hey, we could take a little bit longer and make it really be proud.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. I'll just punch in my final little comments here at the end. I'm very supportive of the project. I understand there are challenges with the deed restrictions and other aspects of it, and I'm sympathetic to all sides. As Mr. Scher said, I'm not taking any sides in that matter. But I am very supportive of the redevelopment of this site. I think the proposal that is put forth is a beautiful development. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned, we are being presented with small residential units in our downtown. Small residential units in our downtown. Let me say that again, because I can't remember the last time in my 12 years on the board or whatever it's been that we had that. Now, I am not suggesting that I'm going to vote yes simply to push it along or because, well, that's all we care about and I'm going to ignore other things. I completely respect Mr. Jeffries and Mr. Kozak's point of view on this. And like Mr. Jeffries, I didn't really see it until Mr. Kozak brought it up. And I see it. I do understand what he, particularly when you look at that one rendering of the two buildings. But I think that rendering sells the building short. And if you actually look at the elevation view, Ms. Boyce's points and Mr. Biddison's responsive have swayed me to the point that I really do think it complies with the spirit and intent. And if anything, we're really picking at very small, minute details and perhaps different interpretations. And with that being said, I'm certainly going to support this tonight, with no disrespect to those that have another opinion. Lastly, I do understand the concern of some in the community related to parking. We talked about this at length on Monday night at the joint meeting, but let me just again be clear, this project meets the zoning ordinance. This is not a case of the planning board kicking the can because we have no legal authority to issue moratoriums on anything as an advisory board in this community. City Commission is looking at the parking assessment district and concerns about the parking assessment district, its supply and how it is being operated are completely valid in my mind, but should be addressed to the commission and not this board, even though I do appreciate the concern. So with that, I will be supportive of this if someone wishes to push forward in a manner to try and recommend approval, or pardon me, to approve. We've gone around quite a bit. Is there anybody interested in it? Is there further discussion that's warranted?
I'll make a motion, but just let me get to the appropriate area so I can see what we're looking at here.
Let me see, Mr. Klein, you thought that number 7 of the proposed recommendation would be deleted. Janelle wanted to insert another matter. I'm not sure what language she would propose. Robin, maybe you could second her motion.
I don't think she did. Ms. Boyce?
I don't. I'm happy to make the motion, but I'm not adding another condition.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Boyle?
Sorry, I actually didn't hear what Janelle just said. It went all fuzzy.
She said that she has no other conditions that she wishes to add. So if you were ready to make a motion, feel free. Okay, and could I confirm that number 7, that's to do with light fixtures, is no longer to be considered? I believe so, correct. All right, okay, I'll make a motion that based on the review of the site plan revision submitted, the planning division recommends that we approve, the board approve the final site plan design for 35001 and 35075 Woodward, the Maple, with the following conditions. 1, City Commission approves a lease agreement with the applicant to use public property. 2, the applicant lower the height of the rooftop screening to 10 feet, obtain, or I think that's a typing error, or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Number 3, the applicant correct plans to show at least one of the loading spaces to be 12 feet in width, or obtain a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals. 4, the applicant increase the height of the juniper screen, the transformer and fuse box to 6 feet and select another type of daylily. 5, the applicant correct the photometric plan and elevations for accuracy and consistency to show all proposed light fixtures and the corresponding light levels. 6, the applicant provide dimensions for the proposed utility size brick and further specifications of the clear zoning and obtain administrative approval for
clear glazing and obtain administrative approval for same. Gosh. Number 7, the planning board approves the 2-foot projection for the steel canopies marked on the plans. And finally, number 8, the applicant comply with the requests of all city departments.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Boyle, second by Mr. Williams. Discussion at the board level on the motion itself. Seeing none, we will go to the public one last time for a discussion of the motion to approve the final site plan and design plan for this project. I see Mr. Bloom, you have your hand up. You have a comment on the motion, please.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chairman Klein. Two comments. The first is you had said that this plan comports with the ordinances for parking, so the planning board doesn't have a say, and it's up to the. As I recall, Ms. Eckert saying this site does encroach on city property and would require a lease and a lease agreement. Because of that, I don't think I'm mistaken in thinking that the planning board and the city commission has quite a bit of leverage to negotiate changes that they would like to this plan, assuming the developer is willing to go along. Secondly, you had the owner or someone that has an interest in the Hunter House basically say that he is going to litigation over this issue. And I just think you would be remiss, and I don't know what the city attorney has said about this, in not getting a legal opinion on what kind of costly litigation the city could be involved in by going ahead with this. And I think the public has a right to know if you guys are pursuing this and recommending it, and the city does get sued, this could be as evidence in the comments that Mr. Boyle made about he doesn't care if this goes to court or not, fire away, could put the city and the taxpayers here in legal jeopardy. So I think it's important that the public knows what kind of risk we're being potentially dragged into by approving this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, we will bring it back. Can we please call the roll?
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Janelle Boyce,
Yeah.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries,
No.
Bert Kosek,
No.
Daniel Scher.
Yes.
Thank you very much. My count is 5-2. Motion passes. Thank you, board. Thank you, applicants. Appreciate it. I would hope that this would be the last time we see you here for a site plan on this site.
But you're not a betting man.
I'm not a betting man, but we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Next item on the agenda is the final site plan and design review for 34745 Woodward Avenue, Jack's Car Wash. Also another one that we have seen on a number of occasions. And Jana, the applicant has requested a postponement on this one. Is that correct?
That is correct. They have requested it be postponed further.
Can I ask a question? On July 28th, what other matters do we have?
On July 28th,
That's the
we
proposed.
have 460 North Old Woodward, which is a brand new building that's proposed. It's a preliminary site plan review. We have a final site plan and design review for 135 Pierce. And I believe at the end of the meeting, Chairman Klein might bring up potentially adding outdoor dining to that agenda. In any event, we can discuss that later if you like.
So I'm going to just say that I'm not going to agree to postpone to July 28th unless it's 2024.
Jana, just for the record, while we kind of mull our options here, postponement to a date certain clearly allows the opportunity for it to save a spot, so to speak, and perhaps avoid additional notice. However, depending on how far out we get, we may want to, just out of caution, notice again anyway. But if we postpone without a date certain, what are the ramifications thereof to the applicant and to the city?
The ramifications, if we postpone indefinitely, it just means that when they are ready to come back, they will have to resubmit and get back in line. So for instance, right now, if you postpone them to July 28th, they would automatically be put on the 28th agenda. But if they decide to come back in a month and submit, they'll get put in the next available slot, which will not likely be July 28th.
Was there a reason for asking for the postponement? Did I miss that?
Well, I don't have clear details, but I will tell you that we have been working internally with this applicant for a long time. And the last I heard was, yes, they definitely wanted to come back on and they wanted to be on this meeting until about just before the agenda was. So it must have been sometime mid last week. They asked for more time because they would like to make some additional changes, given that they feel, well, I don't want to quote them, but based on what they think, rights they think they have with regards to the potentially owned by MDOT right of way.
What's the date for site plan review in August?
August? It is August 25th.
Okay,
How
Mr.
many
Chair-
times-
Yeah.
How
Ms.
many
Boyce.
times have we postponed this one? I feel like this has happened a lot,
Yes, it has.
It has happened a lot.
like 5 or 6 or what? I mean,
More than one and less than 10.
Yeah. Board, if you want a recommendation from me, my recommendation would be we postpone with no date given.
Get them in line.
I say they need to get in line. We have far too much on our plate and far too many other opportunities for us to look at site plans that we continually hold spots for people that are just kicking the can month to month until they feel the need to pull the trigger and give us something. And in this case, they didn't even bother to do that. So
We don't need to do anything if we just let it go, right? Jana, we don't need to make a motion.
Correct. Yes, you can just take no action on it and they'll have to resubmit.
Okay.
is there anyone on the board that disagrees with that? Mr. Kozik?
I just wanted to say that I don't even know what they're thinking about doing anymore. But I guess I'm going to be optimistic, and I suspect we could all see that site could use improvement. So I don't want to come off as a city as saying, we don't care, just keep what you currently have. I'm not that optimistic, and based on what we've seen before, that what they're proposing, is necessarily good for the city. But so I have no idea what they're up to. But sure, put it off, postpone it.
Mr. Scher?
I think for clarity purposes, it would be good to, specifically say something rather than take no action. So if it's in order, I would move that we postpone this matter indefinitely. I forget the address.
We have a motion by Mr. Scher. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Mr. Kozik. Any further discussion at the board level? Jana, you have any issues with what this would do, or would it cause any different outcome than just not taking action? I just want to make sure we're not getting ourselves into a pickle.
No, I don't think so. There's no plans for you to review. I mean, they didn't submit anything, and
Fair enough.
postpone it indefinitely is reasonable in the number of spots that they have held in the past.
Excellent. So let me throw it to the public one time. Is there anyone from the public that would care to comment on the motion to postpone? I do not see hands go up. So let us bring it back to the board, and can we please call the roll?
Daniel Scher,
Yes.
Bert Kosek,
Yes.
Brian Williams,
Yes.
Janelle Whipple-Boyce,
yes.
Robin Boyle,
Yes.
Scott Klein,
Yes.
Stuart Jeffries.
Yes.
Thank you. We are unanimous. Moving along, we go into miscellaneous business and communications. Jana, live meetings starting in July. What do we have on this?
Yes, live meetings are starting in July, so the planning board's first meeting will be July 14th. It will be live. Board members are required to be present in the city commission room as they were previous to the pandemic. There are 2 exemptions under the current law that would allow you to come in remotely as a board member. 1, you're on active military duty, or 2, you have medical reasons for doing so. If you wish to do that, you would have to if you call in via Zoom, you would have to state that you have medical reasons why you cannot attend live. And that's why you're remote, and you have to state where you're remoting in from. We are changing things around in the city commission room to add more spacing between board members. And we're also spacing out members of the public. The meetings, while they will go back to the normal broadcast and normal attendance at City Hall, there will also be a virtual option of Zoom for any members of the public or staff to try to log in and try to get as many or as few people in the city commission room as possible. Unfortunately, the way the law is now, board members are required to be live.
Does the city have any, has the city itself issued any requirements, mandates, orders, if you will, related to City Hall and anything related to capacity of the number of residents that are allowed to attend, or anything that we need to be aware of?
Just the basics that, they ask that you try to keep 6 feet of social distancing, but it is not a strict requirement anymore. But anyone that is not vaccinated will be required to wear a mask in the building. And as I said, we're going to be putting up signage and spacing things out as best we can in the commission room. City Hall is not open to the public for the public to wander through every day, but it will be open on nights when there's public meetings that are required to be live. Folks will have to enter through the police department doors on Pierce, just like, if you recall, you've done in the past. We are setting up a monitor in the hall as well, so that if people feel that there's too much activity or too many people in the room, then the public will be able to go out in the hall and spread out a little bit as well.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Okay. Thank you, Jana. Any administrative approvals or anything we need to talk about?
Well, courtesy of Nick, I had to throw him under the bus. He just has one thing he wanted me to raise, and it's not an administrative approval. But you recall you saw Bloom Bistro come through and you recommended approval. Because it's in a historic district, it also had to go to the HDC. The HDC looked at it last week, and they recommended some changes to the facade improvements based on the fact that it was in the historic district. So I guess he just wanted me to raise this issue with you. They're going to come back with revised plans at a later HDC meeting. But what level of scrutiny did you want to see? Did you want to have a look at it again? Did you want them to come back to the board? You just want us to share the plans with you for a review, or just a look prior to going to the city commission?
Any opinion by the board? I mean, I think this is something that is probably in the purview of the HDC rather than the board, correct?
Correct. And that's why it's supposed to go to the HDC second, because of the state law for historic buildings.
Right. I'm not seeing a lot of hands go up. Or Mr. Sheriff, did you have a
question? So the HDC changes are not anything that impact the site plan. It's not relocating entryways or changing openings for windows or that kind of thing?
I don't believe so at this point, but Mr. Dupuy has his hand up. So I don't think they've finalized the plans, but let's bring Nick in and ask him, since he was at the HDC meeting last week.
Hey guys, just in bed, but I thought this was important at least. I'm unmuted, good. So it could change entryways, Dan. It could change the entire facade. It's kind of hard to say. At this point, I know that the applicant is looking to potentially separate the Bloom Bistro from the overall building changes, just so that it's easier for the HDC to approve, so that they can get Bloom going. So there could be some significant changes. I'll say that. I have not seen plans, so I don't know for sure.
So I guess my thought is that if it's something that changes the traditional site plan characteristics, it's probably something we ought to see.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Fair point. But if it's just changing facade, then I don't think we need to get into it. Fair enough. Draft agenda for the next regular meeting on the 14th. I know I believe you had postponed the matter for RH, is that correct?
RE.
Okay.
That's correct. And also amended the rules to hear a site plan review at that meeting.
Okay. And as of now, there's nothing else on that agenda, but just that item or those items, correct?
Right. The RH final site plan and special land use permit
And
Okay.
whatever study sessions.
and study session items,
Right.
which presumably we'll discuss next.
Right. So real quickly, board, and Jan, if you don't mind, maybe I'll just kind of jump in. What I had in mind, and I appreciate the time tonight to do so, I won't take too much of it. These are two rather large tasks that have been thrown to us, rightfully so, by the City Commission on Monday night. And I was hoping that we could just quickly go through this together and make sure that we are all understanding of where we're heading and agree on our approach. I don't want to get into any sort of deliberation or discussion of the real details, but you know, when I look at outdoor dining, if I might just kind of dive in, it is my take that we've been directed to review the existing outdoor dining ordinance and recommend potential changes if appropriate, based on some lessons learned from the temporary outdoor dining expansion the City Commission enacted during the pandemic. And you know, why are we doing this, or kind of what are we really supposed to be looking at? In my mind, what I took was that, you know, there currently is an allowance for off-season outdoor dining. However, there are additional conditions that are in place, whether it be to bring all the furniture in and out every night, whether it be special permits or other things. And there are also furthermore restrictions on what type of outdoor seating arrangements typically can be used during those times. What I took was that the City Commission is open to recommendations to change some of the existing ordinance and those conditions to potentially incentivize dining in a more of a 12-month environment, all right, that doesn't change quite so much between the seasons. As long as, for at least some food establishments, as long as certain conditions are met. They're open to hearing about us talk about the placement of decks and or some form of enclosure, whatever that may mean, but they clearly want the ordinance to regulate, and they want to make sure that this ordinance cannot be used to create an additional indoor space in a tiny building put on the sidewalk. I think that was very clear from most of the commissioners, at least in my mind. And in that realm, they want us to preserve the intent of both the outdoor dining ordinance, which is there to activate the street, as well as the bistro ordinance to facilitate small, eclectic places, not doubling or tripling in size over the course of outdoor dining. I guess I'm curious, is that how the rest of this board feels? And I want to make sure that we're in alignment before we go any further. Mr. Williams.
Yeah, and I think to follow along with that, I think that the commission listened to Bert Kosak's very eloquent remarks on dealing with the structures being attached to the building, and that was clear an indication they didn't want that based on Bert's articulation. I thought was well done. I would simply offer also that that we have, and I don't remember the commissioner that mentioned it, but there are separate and distinct types of facilities that utilize outdoor dining. I would simply recommend, we are not restaurateurs, to my knowledge, none of the 9 of us. Maybe Nasim is in her secret life, but I think it's important that we do this with participation from all 3 or 4 types of restaurants that utilize outdoor dining, and we listen to them. The second thing is, I do think it's important that we go about a little bit of a discovery program to understand what other communities are doing and how they're doing it. I don't know that we need to make a special trip of Jana to Paris, but she could probably go to Ferndale. But I do think it's important that we gather information on how other communities are addressing this and how the restaurateurs in general. I'm really not interested in making a bunch of proposals which, as a practical matter, are useless to them. So I think we don't need to do exactly what they say. I'm not suggesting the inverted, but I think there needs to be some level of participation. And I agree with your description, Mr. Klein, exactly as to how you presented.
Excellent. Mr. Kozik.
I agree with your description. One of the things that, at least, I would want in preparation for that to be productive, either I have to go out for more walks and look at everything that's sort of been done. The other thing that would be helpful, occasionally, I don't know, I'll hear something like townhouse. Like there was a huge structure that was built out there and then it was gone. I don't know what happened, so I think one of the commissioners was referencing Lux. He liked that. I just wonder, Jana, is there some overview, public record, if you will? It's like, this worked out well. These guys were making fires in there. This one had electrical cords going, just what have been the issues? I mean, I can, from my own standpoint, I can look at it and say, this looks good, or it doesn't look good, or it's too close or whatever, but is there some other history that I'm not privy to?
Yes, there is. And that's tickets that have been issued, whether it's for building violations, fire violations, health and safety, et cetera. Yes, we have those.
And I think, Jana, you and I talked, maybe even photos of the existing decks that were up over the winter, just to have, so we can, not to say we're going to say do this and not that, but we're in a unique position where we're going to change an ordinance for something that has already kind of occurred, and we can kind of see what worked and didn't, right? In real life, and not just pretty rendering.
And we've committed from the staff standpoint to go around and take pictures of all of the existing establishments.
Even stormwater runoff or something, have some of these blocked, the natural flow.
Fair point.
I don't know, but give us some background information so that we're productive in our conversations.
The one thing you didn't mention, Scott, was timeline.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that in a quick sec, maybe, if you don't mind, because I think I had a couple other hands for things they'd like to see, but that is a very important point, if you don't mind, Mr. Williams.
That's fine.
Ms. Boyce, did you have your hand up? I thought you were.
I did. I was wondering if maybe part of what you present could talk. Well, let me say, I feel like some of the least successful outdoor enclosures are the much more temporary structures. And some other successful examples I've seen on vacation and things like that are where there's more of a permanent component, like a vertical post that is set in the ground and it is on, public property, but a piece of it stays no matter if the sail or the canopy comes down a certain time of year, let's say, for example. And it just makes a better overall structure. And it doesn't have to be overly cumbersome. It could be one or two vertical posts. But I just wonder where our position might be as a city and how, if we saw some of those examples that were successful as a board, how we might choose to allow such a thing as a city in our public property to have things that are permanent year-round, even if they're not necessarily doing a canopy certain times of the year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's part of what we have to at least discuss, without saying I agree or disagree. I think that's part of the analysis, right?
So really, yeah, just where we might stand on that as a city, if that would be something we could consider, and how we could facilitate it if it is something we can consider. So just a little, I don't know how we could get there. So I'd like to know how we could if we want to.
Mr. Jeffries, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, it was touched on, but I think we owe it to everybody. There was a lot of ideas around our local area. There's a lot of great ideas throughout our country, but then there's municipalities outside of the U.S. where this has been going on for generations, much more than what we've done. And if we're going to do the deep dive on this, I'd like to, take it outside of, Oakland County and look at some of the stuff in our country and maybe some other places. And so.
Mr. Boyle.
Yes, thank you. I know I don't want to make this a huge project, and I fear that we may be going down that road, particularly what I'm about to say. I would also find it extremely valuable that as we review this information, that we are quite clear as to the distinctions that exist even within our small downtown, and they're real, and they really do affect the use of the sites and the appearance of the sites. And particularly I'm referring to public as against private property. If you walk down Merrill, for example, you've got almost every condition you could possibly imagine within 150 feet between La Strada, what used to be Rojo and Sidecar, but is now vacant, and then you move along to 220, which has got two distinct areas, if not three distinct areas, two private and one public. It is complicated, and whatever we do needs to reflect the complexity of the public and the private domains. I know that suggests complicated spreadsheets with color coding and all the rest of it, but therein lies the route we should be taking. We really do need to have this in front of us. So I don't think we want to rush into this, and I think we need to give it serious thought as to how we look at this process.
I would agree, Mr. Boyle, and even throw in sidewalk widths. Different streets may support different conclusions, quite frankly, as we looked at with other things.
Absolutely.
Some don't even, at least one was in an alley. So.
Yeah. I'll throw out there that Commissioner Hoff brought up a great point that as you're getting into tickets and other things, input from public services as far as operations, particularly in the downtown, the police, anybody else that has any input on how this did work would be great. I know Mr. Marcus had indicated that there were certain agreements in place with people that had outdoor dining during this period. I don't want to get into reviewing the agreements, but I'd like to understand if they're just globally, if anybody going for this as part of their SLUP would have to tie into an agreement that would, for instance, require them to do snow removal or require them to do X, Y, and Z. It would probably be good for us to at least understand that, those constraints as part of this analysis, right? Good points. Anybody else have a point on anything else we need before we start talking timeline? We'll go Mr. Boyle and then Mr. Jeffries and then back to Mr. Williams.
I forgot to add it. I forget the name. What we used to know as a PSD, could we make sure that they're wrapped into this? Because they've got a good way of connecting the businesses together. It strikes me as Mr. Williams was saying, we need to get involved with the restaurateurs. Let's use that mechanism.
Great point. As best we can. That's a great point. Mr. Jeffries, and then we'll finish up with Mr. Williams.
Yeah, I was just going to say, similar to what Robin just say, that these guys, we need to have the restaurant community involved. But we need to make sure we come up with something, and that this is going to be it. Because every time this gets changed on them, that's a significant amount of money. When you've got 65 seats to spread this over and all. They're putting them down and taking them up. And so I think what I've heard from several of them is that, just tell us what it is and let's stick with it.
Yeah, I get you. So Mr. Williams, you brought up timing. And I think that's a great point.
And I would just simply totally agree with Stuart's point. I think there's already a level of anger among the restaurateurs for the timelines that they are faced with now, which is the end of June, to take these facilities down. I suspect also, and I don't know how we factor this in, that the public, and the residents of Birmingham probably don't have a clue as to what's going on. And I don't know how the chairman proposes to deal with that, but it's a difficult task. And finally, I can tell you based on conversations I've had that there is an expectation by the restaurateurs that whatever is done in light of Stuart's comments that this be finalized before the winter season of 21-22 begins. That's not very far away.
No, it's not. And I don't know if there's much we can do about that, Mr. Williams, but I do think that we owe it to the commission and to the restaurateurs to make our best effort to not sit back and ramble down unnecessary rabbit holes with this. It's an important lift. It's a heavy lift, but it's one that I think we need to make, in my mind, the first priority on our action list outside of the review of the second draft of the master plan later on this year. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk about that tonight was simply to collect this information, to get us on the same page, so that next meeting, we might even begin with some semblance of information to start wading through on this topic.
I had some thoughts, so I'll just give you my general thought on that. One, consistent with some of the comments people have made, that the planning department would give us information on the current status by the first meeting in July, assuming that that's available. So we would at least understand in detail what has happened with pictures, and that we spend a fair amount of time studying that. And secondly, that we begin the process basically a month from now of looking, as Stuart has suggested, at what other communities have done. I think we need to put the accelerator on this before the master plan arrives. And that probably means almost every meeting in July and August needs to be devoted to this, irrespective of our rules of procedure.
I don't disagree, as long as we can make them workable meetings and have the time for staff to do work in between. I agree.
Or we simply have to hold a special meeting, which I'm amenable to doing. Because the end of July meeting is going to be pretty jam-packed based on what I heard, but I don't want to go a month and a half.
I agree.
So if we think we need another meeting, let's schedule a special meeting.
Mr. Kozik.
I just want to add one more thing, because I could see this becoming very, very, very complex. One simple way to view this, and I think I mentioned this at the commission meeting, is, let's forget COVID completely.
Yep.
Let's dial it back and let's skip forward, and it never happens. What's wrong with our current ordinance, the way it's written, and what it allows and what it doesn't allow? Let's just start there. And then somebody could say, well, I get rained on and you don't allow some type of a canopy. Okay, we can have a conversation about it. Or, you don't allow heat. I need heat. Or, but I hope this is not, I hope this is not about taking 65 and making it 75, 85, 95, 100.
No,
And that's why, again, we have to be really focused there, and otherwise this could be very complicated.
Mr. Kozik, I agree with you 100%. I think that's the kind of approach I'd like to take. And to me, the idea of whether the outdoor dining is kind of one continuous season or it's on season and off season are kind of details we really need to get our arms around if we're going to allow more substantial things in the right of way. And yes. What does that mean? What are those things, right? And then to your point, while we're waiting on some information from staff, let's just dive into the current ordinance. Is there anything that jumps at us that might be an impediment or that might need tweaking? But I don't think we're writing a brand new ordinance. We're amending what we have and answering that fundamental question.
And we need to distinguish between the types of entities. I mean, the bistro ordinance is separate and distinct from other outdoor dining, which doesn't have as a feature alcohol. And I simply don't have by memory the things that Bert is suggesting, which is what are the numbers based on each category? And we can look at that the first day in July.
Absolutely.
Sure. We should start with that. Absolutely, I agree.
Great. Janet, is this helpful for you and team to start us down the right path?
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent.
You got somebody in the public. Mr. I
do. I apologize. I lost track. I am
still losing track.
Still losing track. There we go. We will take it to the public quickly for a comment on this topic. Someone listed as iPhone. Could you please introduce yourself and provide your brief comment?
I'm sorry. My name is Joe Bongiovanni. I'm associated with Market North End. Lux Bar and Grill sells on the North End and soon become EM, which is in progress. I'm also a Birmingham resident here on the North End. Wow, this is really great, you guys. This was a great conversation that really came around in a full circle with Mr. Cossack's final comments. I raised my hand because I was afraid that maybe his statement would not be recognized in that the 65 and 65 is perfectly good at this point in time in all of our views. And, you know, it's based on that original street side seafood kind of model that has grown a little bit because Townhouse's patio might have been a little larger or whatever. But, you know, a 65 seat patio is, in our estimation, is more than enough to handle. Let's be honest, staffing and everything else and space considerations. And so it does come down to some really fundamental conversations regarding these structures that are in the right of way. And I have to be honest, I just love to recap briefly our experience. Because of the ongoing changes with COVID and such, you know, both Lux and Market obviously have structures now that as operators we're pretty proud of and we think function wonderfully under the expanded outdoor dining allowances that were made by both the MLCC and the city, and we're super pleased with what the city has allowed us to do. And while we kind of are super, you know, we're concerned and disappointed if they were to come down on June 30th, what has been accomplished has been great. And I do think that in some ways, both Market and Lux are great case studies for you because in one way, Lux is a space that could be a long-term solution, whereas Market would not be a long-term solution for us as operators. We would not be looking for that platform long-term in our situation. We have 42 or 44 seats in our patio currently. To have that structure for another 20 or so seats to get up to 65, that's not part of what Market is. It's not a necessary element. We wouldn't seek that, especially with the parking fee adjustments and such. It wouldn't make sense to us to take that up and down. But so I love what the dialogue is. I'd love to be a participant, and I'll keep it really short and sweet that way because I know that you're not making any decisions tonight. Any influence that the planning board may have in further direction on the June 30th decision, whether it's through influence or conversation, it's always appreciated. The one thing I will say on the current situations that we're all in. There was a presentation recently where our iteration of a patio from last summer was shown, and it's 180 degrees from where we are currently. And it was just a matter of timing, honestly. We were never proud of our situation initially, and as soon as it became apparent that the governor was going to extend shutdowns further, we felt it necessary to reestablish that in a more structured thing. So I think Ms. Whipple-Boyce mentioned that many of us were kind of handicapped with how we did it, and the hodgepodgeness was kind of built on that back and forth that we were undergoing at that time. So for Market at this point, we tore down our tent and tore down our platform in November, and then we reapplied for, after 4 weeks, we were granted the structure you see. The similar situation happened for Lux, although Lux was really more of a winter thought. So anyway, thank you for the time, and I hope you'll consider me in the future for any dialogue that you have.
Absolutely. We appreciate it. Please show up for our meetings. Any last comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. I just want to close this by making it very clear. I know Mr. Giovanni brought it up, that our study has nothing to do with COVID temporary dining expansion. That is a city commission policy issue, and this board is not being asked to talk about that at all right now. So just to be clear. Lastly, real quickly, parking standards we've been asked to review based on our request. I think it's important to note that we have not been asked, nor will we, analyze the parking assessment district, how well it works, how it doesn't work, parking capacity of downtown, et cetera. I think it's important to mention that we are looking at a review of the standards and requirements for parking in our community in general in the zoning ordinance. Our ordinance has not been changed in a long time. Ms. Ecker, it'd be nice at some point to know the exact date of that, just for the record. I know it's been close to 20 years probably. There is a prevailing paradigm, if you will, in urban planning for at least the last 5-6 years that perhaps communities parking or zoning ordinances are requiring too much parking. The City Commission has asked us, therefore, to study our requirements, compare them in industry standards, standards of other communities in Michigan, around the country, and determine if we need to make any changes. And that's really the extent of what we're doing. I know that there is probably a perception by some on this board, and maybe likely some of the commissioners, that maybe we do require too many parking spaces. And that's all well and good, but we need to bear out that based on the empirical evidence, and that's really what we're talking about, is what does our zoning ordinance require for specific uses? How do we bring that, if needed, into accordance with current best practices and standards, and where does that lie in regard to anything we may be trying to incentivize with regard to the master plan? But it does not include an assessment of the parking assessment district. Is that a fair statement? Did everybody take the same tenet from comments on Monday night? Mr. Williams?
Yes. And I would simply, you know, I agree. We were not asked to look at the parking assessment district, but again, I hate to jump ahead, but timeline, Jana, there is an ongoing analysis by the commission and staff of the parking assessment district. Can you at least let us know the timing of that review so that we can factor in what we're doing also from a timing standpoint?
I don't have an answer tonight, but I can keep it in mind. Last I heard was it was going to be coming up over the next couple of months, most likely in September, but I don't know if that's set in stone.
My own personal view is that because of the expectations of the restaurant community, that has a higher priority from a shortened time period than the parking study. I also think it's important, same thing, that we get as much information as we can on what other communities are doing, both nationwide, and if we have to go outside the country, so be it. Robin has his hand raised.
Yep, I agree completely. Mr. Boyle.
I'd like to make a suggestion, and it may not go down particularly well, that this task might well be given in some shape or form to a consultant. This is a task that is difficult. It's huge. As the chairman said, there's a paradigm that we need to be really aware of and understand it. And I think we're putting an enormous onus on the staff on their own to do justice to this particular topic. Now, I don't know whether this would sit well with you, Mr. Chairman, or with Jana. Certainly might not sit well with the City Commission. But it might also, if we did go in that direction, indicate just how serious this matter is. And it is not something that is done quickly and on the fly,
Agreed.
but is given some really serious analysis. And if I may finish with a little biased comment, I would not want this to be done by a, quote, parking consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle.
No, he has to get a little humor in it.
He does, I do. I appreciate the comment, and I wonder if perhaps, since we haven't discussed any sort of consultant work at this point yet, perhaps maybe we could start to get our arms around what this is and what information we have. And as Jana and the board start to collect some information, some discussions could be had with her and perhaps Mr. Marcus to see if there is any need, willingness, or budget to bring on some consultants to assist us.
That's fine. Mr. Chairman, may I make one further suggestion, and that is the conclusions as you have made on these two topics. I think it would be helpful if Chairman Klein would communicate that back to the commission, simply from a standpoint that they understand right at the outset what we think we've been charged with, so there's no misunderstanding.
Certainly. Mr. Kozik, you had your hand up, and then we'll go to some
Yeah,
other.
just a couple of things. As we embark on this, I don't know that our ordinance is clear about stacking of cars. Does that comply with towards your count? I'm not sure it addresses it, or what is it? The one car in front of the other. I think we've allowed that sometimes, but I don't know that it's clear that that's allowable. I think that, something that my guess is we'd probably be open those sorts of things, but let's build it in our zoning ordinance instead of us guessing. As I mentioned at the meeting, I'm not so confident that if we change these numbers, I'll pick a 20% reduction or 30, just pick a number. I don't know that we're going to get better development or housing that's smaller, or and then furthermore, this P3 thing, which well, it's come up in the past. I won't get into the details of that, but even in other places and where it's been explored here, developers said, well, why would I become a partner with the city? Where's the win for me? It just added complexity and lawyers and timelines. And so that figures into this. In my mind, it's like, go build more public parking. That's the way we're going to get better development. It's not by reducing car counts by, 3 or 4 or 5 or something like that. So all of it, again, everything's complex. It's all intertwined, but we need to be mindful of those sorts of things.
Agreed. We need to be mindful of the potential impact as well. So, Mr. Chair.
I guess from my perspective, I think this parking issue is best informed by the master plan. And while I'm not looking to delay things, we certainly have plenty to do between now and when the second draft of the master plan comes out. So I think that while it's fine to get started and start thinking about how to do it, I counsel us against getting too deep in it and even launching a consultant on it, if that's the way the commission ultimately decides, until the master plan has a little more shape to it.
Fair point. And I guess I agree with Mr. Williams that this is secondary to the outdoor dining as far as prioritization goes to me, which means it's third behind the master plan and outdoor dining. We might have a free opening on some study sessions to continue a dialogue and just get organized for that point, Mr. Chair. So appreciate your points.
I'm reminded that at the July 14th meeting that a couple of our members are going to be absent. So I don't know what that means, but I think it's important that everybody participate to the extent they can.
Yeah, I think we'll just have to go through it, Ms. Williams. All right.
You have a
Mr.
public.
Chairman,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Boyle.
yeah, I think Dan's comment is absolutely correct. I think all of us have been sitting here over the past maybe 45 minutes on both topics, wondering how we connect or how we take this jigsaw puzzle and make it whole through the master plan. And he articulated it very clearly there. But is there not an opportunity to do that by way of looking at, let's just take one issue, parking as a component of draft number 2?
Sure. Got to be.
Yeah, I don't think you're far off in what you're saying, at least the way I take it. I think, to me, we don't want to get too far ahead and dive into this and dig ourselves into a position before draft 2 is moving along its way. At the same token, we shouldn't be sitting here doing nothing. We should be preparing ourselves so that perhaps a better understanding of our current ordinance by this board, what we require, how it is being applied, how our square footage is being looked at, what are some issues that we look at and see as potentially wrong. When we talk about the juice place or whatever it was that wanted one table and 2 chairs and needed 5 parking spaces. I mean, identify those sorts of issues and without trying to figure out what the puzzle should look like, so that when we're heading into draft 2 and we're working with them, they can counsel us and we can help kind of measure where we're going and then make the decision as to whether or not there's larger consultant work or other things to be done to really hone in on the direction.
Yeah.
I don't think we're necessarily far off on what we're all saying here, I guess is the way I take it.
Good.
Ms. Boyce?
I just want to add that I do think the work that staff will bring us and or a consultant, hopefully, is going to be super helpful, not just to us, but also to the public perception of parking in some ways. We've been receiving these bits of information and like the document we saw that was part of the joint meeting the other night, where I'm not sure where it came from or who compiled it, or how much of it was opinion and how much of it was truth and factual, and now it's kind of being talked about as if it were presented from a professional with resources that will otherwise get to see once staff starts to bring us information and or if we go down the road of a consultant. So that sort of clarity will be nice to have, and I hope that the public will tune in and understand where that information comes from in a more of a professional background, as opposed to like what we received. I was confused by what we received the other night before the meeting until I realized it was like email forwards, So it'll be nice to have that, I think. So look forward to it.
Well said.
You got somebody in the public.
All right, thank you, board. I appreciate all your input on this. I will open it to the public for brief comments. Mr. Bloom?
Hi, thank you.
Oh, there you are.
The city commission, I would venture to say, spends an inordinate amount of time on downtown Birmingham issues over the neighborhoods and residents, with the exception of Greenwood Cemetery, which seems to preoccupy everybody's time. And the planning board certainly spends a lot of time on the downtown. And I would venture to say that the whole parking issue is the main driver behind development downtown. So this is a really serious, critical issue, and it's a hard issue, and it requires a lot of dialogue and work. But if we're going to get it right, everybody, including the planning board, has to roll up their sleeves and tackle this and really start talking about it and figure out what we want, what the issues are, and I think we know what they are, and what we need to do and what we want to do. So please don't be bashful in looking at this or trying to figure out how to get through it. This is probably aside from the unimproved streets issue, this is probably the single costliest, longest term issue or problem that this city faces, and it needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. All right, any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. Thank you, board. I appreciate all your work tonight. Jana, was there anything else from the planning staff? No?
No, nothing else.
Anything else from the board?
Let me just say, I think for the July 14th meeting, I don't know that we need anything other than RH and outdoor dining.
I agree. I agree.
Yes, and RH is a special land use permit and a final site plan.
Agreed.
Thank you.
All right, board, thank you very much. And with that, we will call this meeting adjourned.
Great job.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.